Hello all, welcome back to the fourth lecture. I hope you guys are all doing okay. This week we're dealing with Chapter 4, Personal, Legal, Ethical, Organizational Issues of Information Systems. The first thing, now this is one of the most important chapters in the book because it stems right down to the foundations of what we do with computers and whether we are doing right or wrong with computers. The first thing I'd like to have a look at is what is a simple definition of ethics, because we are talking about ethical and organizational issues. It's a system of moral principles. It's also concerned with the good for individuals and society, known as a moral philosophy. Basically, what we have here when we deal with computers is the 10 commandments of computer ethics. You should not use a computer to harm other people in any way, manner, or form. You should not interfere with other people's computer work. It belongs to them and it's private. You should not snoop around in other people's files due to confidentiality. You should not use a computer to steal. In other words, an example would be committing fraud using a computer. Should not use a computer to bear false witness, claim something that is not true. You should not copy software which you have not paid for or you have not had permission to use. And this is a very big one in the world where people decide that software is actually free, and it's actually companies have spent vast amounts of money paying programmers to write the software, and then somebody else decides that they're going to use it for free and they haven't bought it. That is clearly wrong. So unless you have permission or you have paid for the software, you should not be using it. You should not use other people's computers without their permission, authorization, or compensation. Intellectual property, I'm sure you have heard of. If you write a book or you write a piece of work, that actually belongs to the individual, and you should not use if you find a computer open in a classroom, for example, and somebody's work is on there, that is their intellectual property, and one should not actually, not at all, copy their work and so on. You should rather close it and move on. You should always think about the social consequences of what you are doing when you are using a computer and writing a program. So for example, somebody writes a program such as a social media program. You should be aware of the impact that that will have on society and what you are designing. You do not wish to do any harm. Finally, the last one, you should always use a computer in any way that will take into account the consideration of other human beings. So what we have here is the 10 commandments of computer ethics. Using a computer ethically and not using a computer to steal, cause harm, or cause damage to any other person or individual. I'm moving on to the learning objectives of the chapter, of which there are only 6 in this chapter. The first one is discussing information privacy, which is a critical point. Methods for improving the privacy of information. We will discuss the privacy of email and data collection. So when you are collecting data from a survey, for example, you would obviously want to make sure that whatever people tell you is going to remain private. We can mention this one, which is quite an interesting one, and it's called censorship. And they're not talking about censoring you, but they are talking about, for example, on social media, if you are the owner of that social media site, you would not allow people to post offensive or derogatory material, and that is what we are talking about when we talk about censorship. So you would if somebody posts something that is offensive to other individuals, it is up to the website that owns that social media or platform to actually control it. Discuss the ethical issue related to IT, which is what we've already discussed. Discuss principles of intellectual property. We have mentioned that it is one of the 10 commandments. If something belongs to an individual, you do not steal it. It is the same as copying a textbook. You cannot do such a thing without the written permission of the authors, and that is called infringement of intellectual property. It is very closely related to plagiarism. We will briefly discuss information system issues that affect organizations, including the digital divide. The digital divide is those that have access to no computers, electronic publishing, and the connection between the workplace and employees' health, of all things. And then finally, we're going to finish off with describing something called green computing. And I'm going to actually highlight that in green, because it is what we do with computers and how they can impact on the environment. So there are basically 6 learning objectives to this chapter. Information privacy and how we improve the privacy, what we do with email and data and censorship, ethical issues relating to information technology, intellectual property, discussing how information systems will affect organizations, looking at digital divides, electronic publishing and employee health, and then finally green computing. Privacy issues. Now, employers search, many things can happen that invades the individual's privacy, and that is the fundamental concept of this chapter, is how not to invade others' individual privacy. Because of computer networks and all of the social networking we have, it is very easy to steal information or give out people's cell phone numbers or their personal information, and that is not right. That is unethical. Employers search social networking sites for background. So you apply for a job, for example, and they will go and have a look at your Facebook profile, and you would not be hired because of something that you happen to post on your Facebook profile or your Twitter or your Instagram. Monitoring systems are adopted by employees to check employee performance. In other words, you are being followed at work. Healthcare organizations, financial institutions, online ordering firms all gather your personal information and store it in a database. What they do with that information is critical, and I'm actually going to write here, it is what do they do with it? And that is a fundamental critical question, and it needs to be ethical. I'm going to highlight this in a pink color, because it is what do you do with the information that can cause harm. Moving on. Information about every aspect of people's lives is stored on various databases. The government will have information on you. Your banks will have information on you. Your universities will have information on you. Government agencies, credit agencies, marketing companies will all use databases, and depending how they use that information, should they give out the incorrect information, that is going to represent an invasion of privacy. There are several federal laws, that is in the USA, that regulate the collecting and using of information. I would like to discuss the one in South Africa called the POPI Act. It is the protection of personal information. An example of this is I have been given lists of student cell phone numbers and student addresses. Because of the POPI Act, I am not allowed to give that list to any other individual or any person. I have to follow this act. It's a legal act. It's law that I cannot give out your personal information to any third party. For example, should I take your cell phone numbers and give them to a company that markets textbooks, that would be regarded as unethical. People do that for money. Their marketing is all about the money, and it is very tempting sometimes that you have access to this information because you are working on a computer system and somebody offers you money to give out information. No. Go back to computer ethics, have a look at the 10 commandments of computer ethics, and make sure that you are not infringing any single ones of those. The POPI Act ensures all South African institutions conduct themselves in a responsible manner when collecting, processing, storing another entity's personal information. And they are held accountable. If you break this act, you can be fined and you can be taken to court should they compromise your personal information in any way. If we have a look at the web and network privacy, the internet is so big these days and there is so much information that is posted online. We have on a website what is called an acceptable use policy, which is a set of rules specifying the legal and ethical use of a system. I'm sure when you've signed up for a website, you've had to agree to their terms and conditions. If you sign up for a Google account, you have to agree to their terms and conditions that you will not do anything that is unethical. Accountability issues. Who is accountable? Both the user and the organization are responsible for what they are doing with the information. There is another term that comes up here, non-repudiation, and they refer to it as a method of binding all parties to a contract. Non-repudiation is also known as once it's been implemented, it means you for some reason my computer is not typing. It just means you cannot go back on your word. So non-repudiation is a method binding for all parties, users and companies, and it means if there is any dispute, everybody has signed an agreement beforehand. Guidelines to minimize the invasion of privacy are very straightforward, and I'm going to go through them very quickly. Conduct business only with legitimate websites that have privacy policies. If there's no privacy policy, they can take your information and do as they please with it. Limit access to personnel in a company to only those with authorization to information. You don't give out that information to everybody. You ensure your data is reliable, and you take precautions to prevent your staff from misusing that data. Make sure the data collection has a stated purpose. So if, for example, you do a survey, they will tell you what they are going to use that information for and what they are not going to use it for. Identify ways in a company to prevent personal information from being disclosed. You use verification procedures to ensure that the information you collect is accurate. You ensure records kept on an individual are up to date. You review those records and you correct any inaccuracies. You do not keep record systems that store personal data a secret. In other words, if you are storing personal data about other individuals, you have to disclose that fact to the individual. Federal and data protection laws. The one I've mentioned already is the Protection of Personal Information Act. I would like you to please research that aspect. You go onto Google, type in POPI and have a look at what they talk about. This moves into email, where I'm sure we've all received spam, and that's regarded as unsolicited, unasked for email sent for advertising purposes. Generally, we know what it is, we recognize it, and we just ignore it. Be very careful of falling for any spam email. They are going to collect marketing information that in many cases will be used against your permission. Ease of access. Individuals should assume others have access to their messages. In other words, you make an assumption that any message you send on any platform that other individuals do have access to it, and you need to be aware. One important one here that I'm going to highlight is if you work for a company and you send an email to anybody, that email does not belong to you, it belongs to the company that you are working for, and it is the property of the organization. It is not private. And that is quite an interesting one. You would think that any email you type is your private property. It is not the case if you do it from within a company email address or from within an organization. Data collection on the web. I'm going to go through this very quickly. I think we're all aware of what goes on. Shopping online has become massive at the moment. You've all heard of eBay. Everybody wants to buy everything at a lower price. Some people are reluctant to make online purchase because of concerns about hackers stealing your credit card number and so on. Information on the web can be combined with other information and technologies to produce new information. I would rather talk about cookies, which is a text file. When you visit a website, it is a text file with a unique long ID that is inside your internet web browser and is saved on the user's hard drive. Cookies can both be used for friendly purposes and for malicious purposes. A friendly purpose, for example, is to remember your username when you visit a website and remember some preferences when you visit a website. A malicious use of a cookie, for example, is if you want to search for a cell phone and you search the internet and you go and look at a couple of cell phone prices on a website, and the next minute, everywhere you go, you are receiving adverts for cell phones. That means they are using cookies to follow you around, and they are using them for an unethical purpose. Typically, they help websites customize pages for users. You can disable them on a web browser. You can switch them off if you do not wish to use them. If you are concerned about your privacy on the internet, you can do that. Ethical issues of information technologies. There is an increase in cybercrime, cyber fraud, identity theft, intellectual property theft. And these are all ethical issues of IT. So organizations can reduce unethical behavior by developing and enforcing a code of ethics. Please go back to the 10 ethical commandments, and please be aware that you are aware of them. The first one that we can mention is censorship. And censorship, for example, could be YouTube taking down videos that are offensive. Public information is posted by an organization, a public agency, they are censored for public policy reasons. They censor any content that is deemed offensive to a political, religious, or cultural group. So effectively all that they're saying in terms of this whole chapter is that if you are part of a platform or you are part of anything that is public, you would want to be aware of censorship, of removing anything that is offensive to other people. Restricting access to the web. This is more informational and more of interest. Companies such as China will actually restrict, and I'm going to paste this in a red, Burma, Singapore restrict or forbid their citizens access to the web. Whether that is democratic or not is debatable, but it is something to think about. ISPs, internet service providers, and government agencies should treat all data on the internet equally. And that is very debatable when you move country to country and you have different laws. Parents can use programs to monitor their children's behavior and their children's what websites they are surfing in order to keep them safe. Okay, next one. Information does have an impact on information technology in the workplace. Okay, and how does information technology impact? We can build a stronger economy. We can work from home as we are doing now with me speaking to you. Organizations can use human resources in a large geographical region by having online meetings. Job de-skilling, for example, is an example where computer activity and programs and meeting programs have become so popular that they actually eliminate somebody's job. On the positive note, we have what we call virtual organizations, which are networks of independent companies, suppliers, customers, manufacturers that are all connected via IT and can do business together. They share the skills, they share the cost, and they have access to each other's markets. And that is actually pretty cool, because what you do is, instead of actually having to have a brick and mortar structure, you create what you call a virtual company, and these are becoming more and more popular today. The final topic for the day is green computing, and they are talking simply about promoting a sustainable environment when you use computers. What things can we do that enables green computer? We dispose of them correctly. Computer servers, computing devices, we don't have an impact on the environment. In other words, they are recycled. You need the cooperation of both the private and the public sector for green computing to happen. Ways to achieve green computing, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them. And just in brief, we design products that last longer. We design parts that can be upgraded without replacing the entire system. We design search engines that are faster and consume less electricity. You would be surprised at how much electricity the internet uses. You replace small servers with larger ones. You use computing devices that allow employees to work from home. You conduct meetings over computer networks. It's called green because you are not driving to work and utilizing the highways and polluting the environment. And you turn off PCs at night. And you recycle all computer related materials. These are very straightforward. So just to recap quickly for you guys before we look at the questions in brief. We are looking at personal issues, how not to use people's personal information in any way that can harm them. Legal issues, how not to get sued because you have infringed on personal rights. Ethical issues, our 10 commandments of computer ethics, and how not to cause harm when using an information system. And then organizational issues, which is using computers in an organization in a responsible manner. Moving back finally to the questions, which are right at the end of the notes, are questions for thought. I'm not going to answer them here, but we're going to go through them just very quickly. What are the 3 recommendations for minimizing invasion of privacy? That is food for thought for users and organizations. You would have to read through the notes. What is a super cookie? Okay, this one I'm going to highlight because it's actually a highly critical item. A super cookie is a type of tracking cookie that they put on your internet browser. It's in the web address that is downloaded to your computer by an ISP to collect all the information about where you are surfing, where you are browsing, and what you are searching for. And a super cookie is not something that you want, and it is a reason why you may want to turn off cookies on your browser. That would be used for marketing information. List any 5 of the 10 commandments of computer ethics. I would prefer you to list all 10 because all 10 are valid. What is intellectual property? We spoke about that. If you write a book, that is your intellectual property, and others are not allowed to take that work and reproduce it anywhere on the internet or in print. If a student writes an essay, that is their intellectual property and it belongs to them. This is also related to plagiarism. If you take somebody else's work and you misrepresent it as your own. What are 3 ways an organization can benefit from a patent? I haven't mentioned patents. It's not mentioned in the note. Please do me a favor, and I would like you to Google what is a patent. What are the advantages and benefits of telecommuting? There are numerous. You're not driving to work. You're not harming the environment. It's green. It saves people time. And it allows companies to operate more efficiently in a virtual environment. What are 4 approaches for implementing a successful green computing program? Well, you can choose any of these 4s, any of those 4. My apologies. Guys, that is all for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask on the WhatsApp group or email your lecturers. Please be aware that you would like to do the theory test, which will be posted on the WhatsApp group. It does relate to these notes. Thank you very much for listening, and have a wonderful day.